not be available for the panel tonight.
That's why I'm here.
He's really sorry, and I'm really sorry, we're really sorry, and he will be available in panels tomorrow. I know he has one at 11 in the morning. And I again do apologize.
Is he sick?
He's not feeling well.
Significantly fewer of you left after that announcement than I thought was going to happen.
Wait, he's not here? I'm out.
He just didn't hear, so now he heard, and now he got the news.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
They were all
You're not going to hurt my feelings. How is everybody doing? Rowdy! Rowdy! Wow, I didn't know the keg was outside. I thought that was just water. So we're gonna power on through, even though there is no air conditioning in this room or this entire floor. I
We noticed.
We did, yeah. At least they don't have lights.
Welcome to your fresh hell.
Yeah. Oh, let's turn off the lights. Let's get it dimmed down here.
We turn the lights, set the mood.
We should introduce ourselves. Welcome to the Games and Philosophy panel here at ConBravo. Okay. You haven't even seen if you like it yet. You might why don't we go down the line here and tell a little bit about ourselves, because we do have a wonderful step in here that's really helping us out. Go ahead.
My name is Dan Olson. I run a web series called Folding Ideas that discusses narrative theory. A lot of it is cinema, but also games as well. You can follow me on Twitter, Foldable Human. It's a puppet show too, if you like puppets and are easy to
I am Daniel Cordaro, otherwise known as the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and I love puppets. So this is a perfect and shiny things, as a matter of fact. I actually, in addition to running the Echo Screen Live over there, which is our live show, I actually have a little bit of a background academically with video games. I did my master's thesis on gender construction in contemporary video games, and have taught courses in game design, so on and so forth.
My name is DeSena, aka Rue. I also a Clan of the Grey Wolf. I have a few web shows, 16-bit Gems, The Way Games Work, looks more usually the technical side of things. Let's see. I once half completed a game in RPG Day.
That's true.
Yes. So,
yet to be released. It's not.
yeah.
We're gonna just say it's maybe it's not completed.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah, it's a work in progress.
Thank you.
We lost the funding.
It's
it
only.
was just
It's on hand.
Kickstarter failed.
The Kickstarter failed. This was so long ago before Kickstarter. It's embarrassing to admit. So we're going to talk a little bit about philosophy in video games. If you don't want to talk about philosophy in video games, you're probably in the wrong spot. But feel free to stay, because I think it'll be an interesting topic. We want to cover a lot of stuff, and we want to give you guys an opportunity to ask some questions to us about what you think about philosophy of games as well. So let's kick it off with a doozy. I thought we might talk a little bit about video games as art. Maybe some of you have an opinion about that.
Yes.
Why don't we go down the line and talk about video games as art and what you think they're worth?
One of the most salient points that I think can be made about the question, are video games art, is why are we asking that question in the first place? It presupposes that video games are, like, that their artistic merit is questionable or needs to be justified. And I think we do ourselves a disservice by not reacting to that question going, duh. I mean, of course they are. Not every television show is The Wire. Not every movie is The Fountain. Why does every game need to be, transcendent? They don't. There's a lot of video games that are probably just fun trash. A lot of movies are fun trash.
I can give a couple examples. I think we are fairly young, okay? I mean, I know we just had a panel where we talked about, the 50, 60, 70-year history of video games, but when you think about it, video games as a medium is fairly young, okay? So it's still kind of in its infancy, it's still kind of growing up, and if you look back to the infancy of cinema, right, or the infancy of even something like the printed word, people were asking the same kinds of questions and thought the kind of sublime that was capable with media that came before it was not replicable in this newfangled thingy that people were putting together. I think we're in that same stage with video games, but I completely agree with Dan. I think it is, you know, when we ask that question, we're actually presupposing that we have to justify it. And quite frankly, video games are fun. And when video games are fun, I think there is a great artistic element that is brought out from the creators that is communicated to us as the players.
Yeah, I mean, well, movies are fun, TV shows are fun, books are fun too. They can also be historical and things like that, and granted, there's been a lot more bumpy road with video games and that. You have edutainment and things like that. But you also have
Number munchers.
Art.
Yeah, artistic, anyway.
Yeah.
But, and I think it has to do with the generations that are alive that were around when these forms weren't around. No one questions if books were art or movies. Some still questionability of TV. The idiot box was definitely something that was thrown around back in the 60s, and so because there were a lot more people alive who grew up with TV not around. Now I think most people would just say, yeah, there's art on TV, you know, The Wire, things like that, Mad Men, Game of Thrones. People will readily admit that generally now. And you have a lot younger generation mostly, but a lot of people who grew up with video games will rise to defend it. Of course it's art. And then you have people who didn't grow up with, like the recently passed Roger Ebert, who
God rest his soul.
Said that they can't.
rose that question.
Yeah, cannot and never will be, right?
Yeah, and so, I just said as that older generation passes away, which I'm, you know, yes, but
Did you send that statement afterwards, though?
I believe you said that some.
He added a lot of caveats.
Yeah,
He did, yeah,
because he got a lot of
Original
flack back.
statement he did.
Right.
Yeah. So,
I think
I'll
if-
give him credit for that for sure.
If he played Heavy Rain, he probably would have loved that.
You said like video games are fun and there's artistic merit in it. I think that's something that we forget, and we lose track of that even in television and cinema as well. That something fun isn't art. Like, is comedy art? Well, of course it's art. Sure. But when was the last time a comedy won the best Oscar, or like the best picture Oscar? Sure, like.
I think also we use, you know, there's a very famous example, was it Spielberg, who said when video game can make you cry, that would mean it would be, it had reached the artistic platform. I think that's a terrible way to put it. I mean, art, you know, just because I mean, there's plenty of examples of great art that's come from all kinds of civilizations in the history of humanity. That doesn't make you cry, right? Does that mean it's not artistic?
It's the fetishization of drama.
Completely. I think even beyond that, right? So there is I think a question of what is enduring to the human spirit, right? What kind of things can you connect to in art that make it interesting? Whether it makes you cry, laugh, whatever. If it makes you feel something, if it communicates something to you, then it's more than likely, in my mind, artistic. And who among us wasn't moved by Eris in Final Fantasy VII?
I was going to say Celis and the opera.
I'm just saying, there are plenty of examples, right? There are great examples. If, you know, maybe you didn't sit there and bawl your eyes out, right? The way you did when you watched Titanic. Same time frame. I thought it was a good block. But you probably felt something, right? And if you didn't, you're a soulless loser. No, you're not. I'm a soulless loser. It's okay. No, you feel something, and that I think is indicative of the artistic medium that video games are.
Before moving on to another topic, we want to throw it open for any questions.
Yeah, who wants to talk about art as video games and ask us something about it? Nobody.
I didn't hear the question, sir.
It's funny. I might sound a little crazy on this. It was actually Journey that sort of convinced me of this. And at first going in, I thought, oh, this is going to be dumb where I do nothing. And I'm so glad I spent $15. At least it was only $15. But then, so in the beginning, I'm just wandering. It looks beautiful, by the way. I'll say that without any remorse. For 500 megabytes, or 550 megabytes, it looks simply gorgeous. But the point that convinced me was I was getting near the last levels, the ice mountains. And I bumped into this guy, and that was sort of the big primordial mechanic. You can bump into little companions, and they'll follow you up the mountain. So we were at the final part, and you know, that's when your characters, for all intents and purposes, slowly freeze to death.
Sure.
Slowly and so the little oh right, sorry about that.
Just forget that you heard that.
Yeah,
Who cares?
The hypnotizer.
And your questions?
No, I was just,
Okay.
you sort of wanted me to give a point, so that's what I was
Yeah,
doing.
no, that's good. I think that's
But,
great.
A lot of people have.
I'm almost done.
Okay, go ahead.
I was saying, and you know, the little symbols you can blurt out. So we sort of, as we were slowly freezing to death, sorry about that, but
Dying in some way.
yeah, and you notice the little symbols, used to be able to make big symbols, but now the symbols just got smaller and smaller and smaller, and then we just fell over dead. And that's when I realized, oh God, I feel sorry for this random person.
Look, and honestly, that's something that I think video games can do that other forms of media, they might be able to. It's a little bit harder in that when it makes you interact with a character or something like that, it can kind of manipulate your feelings. Maybe that's not the right
Well,
word,
absolutely.
but
If you can establish, it's a lot easier to establish that interface between the viewer and the character when they're functionally the same thing, because you as the viewer are also the player and the
Right.
controller of that person. You have their agency and you have their well-being is intrinsically linked to your desire to not die, and to succeed and all of that stuff. So it's an easier hurdle to get over initially, but I think paying it off involves some different sleight of hand, different mechanics, and I actually think that a lot of games sort of misstep by trying to just directly replicate. It's like, oh well, in a movie you would do it this way, so let's just copy that.
That is again, I think, indicative of the infancy of video games, and every medium when it comes out tries to kind of look at what's established and copy what's been successful.
And if you want to see a ridiculously successful example
I
of
got
that,
you, you're next.
look at Portal and how it can make you actually care about a weighted companion cube. I know, it's this thing, it's literally just a cube, and then when you throw it in the trash, sorry, spoiler. It
It's
actually,
actually an incinerator.
yeah, the incinerator, it actually, for
Yeah.
most people, I would say, makes you feel bad, and it's a thing, you see shirts, you see
Damn thing had a
clothes.
heart on it, man. I mean, what was I supposed to do? Like metaphorical burning of my own heart. One other thing I was going to say, piggybacking off your point, which I thought was great, is that there is multiple elements to all of these media that we're talking about, right? So there can be art in cinematography, there can be art in writing, there can be art in all these things coming together that make something more of like a symphony, where all these pieces have to kind of play their part in something larger. You can, I mean, there are plenty of examples of games where the writing is good, but everything else sucks. Or where the gameplay and the mechanics are really fun, but it's not very endearing and it doesn't really stick in your mind. So all of these things, and I think that's even more indicative of why video games are art. You have a question, and I've been talking way too long.
It wasn't really much of a question,
Sure.
more of he really covered it already, like that it's actually I think games have a greater potential than maybe other mediums, because you yourself feel as though you have put in all this effort throughout the game, and that you yourself have become the character. And the example I was thinking of was Shadow of the Colossus.
Oh, that's an excellent.
Yeah, I picked a well-known one, I thought most people know. And spoilers.
Oh boy! Oh, We've been out for 10 years.
Someone
Come on.
remember this time.
And toward at the very, very end, you find that all the effort you've put in has been for naught, and you're not actually going to be able to do what you just spent this entire game trying
It's
to
the
do.
usual suspects of gaming.
Yeah, you the player don't get to reap the reward that you were pursuing.
Well, yeah, but again, the creator of that game put a great deal of effort to try to make it look as artistic as possible.
I agree.
I mean, and it had a wonderful environment you could explore.
One thing I do want to say about your point, I don't think games are necessarily a superior medium to cinema or film. I think there are certain types of stories that games can tell far better than cinema ever can, but there are also some types of stories that games will never tell.
And I think it's in terms of engagement, in terms of engaging an audience, you can be just as, I mean, I have watched so many hours of Game of Thrones and read so many books now that, like, if you took those hours together that I've invested in these characters, none of them are me. I just invested the time into the particular media that they're a part of. And I feel like I'm a part of that story now. Like, I go out to the shop floor and I want to go buy, I want to buy all the 7 houses of Westeros, and I want to put banners up, right? I feel like I'm a part of that. So I hesitate. I think it's a great point, Dan. I hesitate to say that there's any kind of superiority to video games as a medium, but I think to deny it the merits of art for what it is a huge mistake. And you guys have some questions on it.
What about video games, not just as the medium of delivery, but the medium of creation? Look at things like Minecraft, people creating art
Yes.
with the video game.
And that's
Something that people have attempted so many times with cinema, and unless you take a kind of meta narrative of why we're here, of YouTube, which allows people to kind of make their own kinds of
It's kind of like a choose your own
loosely
adventure
affiliate-
book. You can do that with a
It
choose your
is.
own adventure book. That's the only example I can think of in written. So.
But not even just in other forms of media, but video games that have tried and failed many times previously to be at all educational or teaching or learning, things like that. You basically have a game that's video game Legos, and people will do what they will with it. Not only create art, but actual technical things. I've seen people that build, at least very early on, building simple computers by creating, fields
Not
of
a programming
circuits.
language.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
I wasn't doing that with my Legos. I'm just saying.
Just Turing complete.
I built a helicopter and threw it off my roof.
One day I logged into my server and a guy had built a clock tower.
What
What happened? One, like, are you on meth? 'Cause
How did you?
two, like, how?
There's a lot of planning that went in there that you were not a part of.
Also, I feel like maybe the term of art may be also too broad of a name as well, because like I've seen like people defend like this guy smearing cheese all over a 5-star hotel room and calling that art. I'm like,
Sure.
I could rant for hours about performance art. Don't get me started.
But I think it's a valid point. I think it's
and,
very
like,
valid.
so you can't consider games art. And also, to another point, you said like there's always been those games that have had horrible stories and good gameplay, or good gameplay and horrible stories.
Right.
What would you throw Deadly Premonition under that?
That's a great. So think about Deadly Premonition sits in, I think, an interesting. So what about the cult classic, right? I mean, why? So I watched an entire 2-hour documentary recently about Scarface. Scarface, and I'm talking about the Pacino version, not the original 1930s that was remade with Brian De Palma. That movie, when it came out, was universally panned. Everyone freaking hated it. Now it's now it is the top-grossing DVD of all time.
It's still pretty bad.
In a lot of ways it's a bad
In a
movie,
lot of ways,
but
it's a terrible
deeply
movie.
influential.
But deeply influential. So what constitutes good art, what constitutes bad art, is probably more difficult to define than art itself, which is, we'll get a good philosophy term here, it's a solipsism, right? If something means everything, it rapidly means nothing. So if everything is art, if I smear my crap on the wall and call it art, then art, what does art really mean?
It means nothing.
It means
That's
nothing.
the real
So,
But you can't,
you also-
I'm sorry, I was just saying you can't tar an entire genre of an entire medium just because of a few bad examples,
You get similar examples in other media as well. I mean, like, Street Fighter, The Legend of Chun-Li is, the script is...
Classic. Oh, that's not the way we're going.
The script and the acting, they boggle my mind at just how bad they are, but the cinematography and editing and music are all, like, highly professional. I mean, the cinematographer shot it, I'm sorry to go off and film here for a second, but in an aspect like this, like, super wide aspect ratio that you'd expect to see in, like, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it's like, did you not know that this was, like, direct-to-DVD trash? Like, the cinematographer expected, like, they were crafting art, like, and it's actually quite a good-looking movie, but it's still terrible.
So I think we've talked this one down a little bit. Why don't we? Okay. Well, we got one more. Someone really wants to ask.
It's sort of on a tangent a bit.
It's okay. Tangential is where we go. Go ahead.
All right. So sometimes I'm kind of sick of the big franchises. You know, you got a million Halo games, a million Mario does whatever games. You know.
Mario does house.
I love.
I like that, that's one of my favorites.
I love just going into a bargain bin and finding some random game that I have never heard of before,
Sure.
if it looks great. And some of these are terrible, some of them I love. And this sort of, once again, back to film, that there are these huge franchises that are there just to make movies, just to make games, just to make money.
Right.
Versus some original things. Do you feel that video games are, I think I may have answered my own question, but video games are saturated by, like film is, by these just like one continuous money
So-
makers,
so
like Michael Bay
I
things.
think I get what you're saying, and I think so. So the question then becomes, right? Is it okay to make a game like Halo 4, which I would argue is a fantastic game, maybe even the best game in the series, even though it was the best-selling game in the franchise? Is that okay? Is it any less artistic, or do you feel any worse purchasing Halo 4 than you did the first game? I would say no. In fact, I would rather see more Halo 4s than I would see a lot of the crap that comes out these days. Now, is there value in something that is new? Do not say those words to anyone in Hollywood right now, because this summer has been an absolute debacle for something new, okay?
That's true.
So I think that it's important to remember that video games are produced to make money. But because something makes money, it probably means a lot of people bought it, which means that it's probably pretty good, or it's at least worth your time.
I think a great counterpoint to that, here in Canada, The Last of Us was sold out for 3 solid weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, it was every unit that they pressed in a factory and pushed out the door was, like, the moment it got on shelves, it was bought within hours.
Even more than Scarface DVDs.
For a game of that size and scope, and for a new franchise to do, like, it's unprecedented. It's this gorgeous, deep, like, it's a crazy awesome game.
A lot of philosophy.
There's
layers to that. There's layers to that.
And it did move, like, it's both sort of this critical darling, and like, oh, here's proof that video games are art, but at the same time, it's vastly, like, it's incredibly successful commercially.
And I think just, the point I'm trying to make is that those things are not mutually exclusive. And that there are, would I much rather see the Halo kind of version rather than the Call of Duty or, Medal of Honor or Medal of Duty or whatever the hell. But
Black and Ghost.
Yeah, exactly. Would I rather see that? Yes, I would. I'd like to see few. I'm the kind of guy that likes quality over quantity. Some people, but you know what? All the people have to do to change that, stop buying.
And this whole sub-conversation here has been in the realm of, it seems in the realm of the big companies,
Yes.
the big, like the Ubisofts and Nintendos, etc. This is a golden age of indie games.
It is.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the Steam summer sale was just ended. I picked up
Yes,
several
yeah,
games.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, what? I have never heard of that studio before, but I'm loving this. I'm loving Kerbal Space Program. It's an alpha in that
FTL.
FTL is also really good.
I currently have a Kerbal in, like, just an ion-powered, like,
Yes.
little capsule moving, like, it accelerates, like, 0.1 miles per hour, and, like, he's just sailing. Who knows?
Wide open.
Anyway, but yes, I mean, so that's a great way where, like, 10, 20 years ago, 5 years ago, people couldn't vote like that with their money. They can.
All right, so we're just going to keep on rolling. You guys are asking good questions, so we're just going to keep on.
You didn't mention Call of Duty, and there's probably like no other franchise more Michael Bay-ish than Call of Duty, right? But there was a scene, the No Russian level in Modern Warfare 2, right? They were trying to make you think, oh, you shouldn't be killing innocent people, right?
Yeah.
But then I remember, like, they're supposed to make you feel proud about killing people. But I remember Heavy Rain, one scene made me question, I've killed so many people in so many video games before, and I'm really feeling about this one guy, like a cokehead, and I'm supposed to have actually felt for once, maybe I shouldn't shoot this guy.
No, I'm sorry.
I just remember like Call of Duty has had one segment. I know like the rest of the game is trash. Like Heavy Rain, certain points made me feel for once.
And you know what? There's value in all of that, right? And one of the things, you know, Joe, you touched on it, the idea that a lot of times we see a generational gap with video games in terms of misunderstanding. You know, yes, wanton destruction is one kind of thing that people do in video games. There is wanton destruction in video games. But there's also a lot of other things, right? And too often we focus on those things. But let me make another philosophical point here that I think we should think about. What is the equivalency there? Right? So is there a difference? I'm asking this rhetorically because it's an idiotic question. Is there a difference between walking into a mall and mowing people down with a machine gun in real life versus doing it in a video game? Yes. Of course it is. Of course there is. But if one does not understand that, one does not have a mature understanding of what video games are and what they do and what the apparatus of video games is, then one would probably mistake the fact that one is training you for the other. And I think what we see a lot is that mistake being happened. Right? People are making that mistake everywhere.
I would agree very much, but at the same time, I think it's important for the video game community and the video game creators, like all media creators, to remember that, well, it's not necessarily training you to be that thing. It could very well be training you to be complicit towards that
Or
thing.
desensitized.
Desensitized towards that thing. And what we are starting to find is that people who overly experience certain types of scenarios in the media that they consume become more willing to accept that scenario as a solution, as a problem-solving solution. People who consume tremendous amounts of violent media accept violence as an answer to problems. It doesn't mean that they'll resort to violence, but it means that something like the police go a little bit too far in arresting someone, and they go, they have to catch him. They become like their attitude towards that extreme becomes complicit because that's what you got to do.
So yet again another failed book idea by the Commodore here. Let me just pitch this one to you guys. I think if there are things we can learn from video games, it's not always number munchers, right? It's not always arithmetic. It's not always where in the world is Carmen Sandiego. Awesome game. But it is also, there are also great things. You mentioned it, right? So you can learn to feel, I think, for people. I realize we're playing a video game, so there's a difference. You can learn to feel for people. You can learn things about society. You can learn things about culture. You can learn good things from video games. You have, think of the pixel art that you have with
From Dragon Warrior, where the hero...
Tell the story. This is a great story.
Oh,
when you got it and why you got it.
So if you ever played Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest, the first half, like, you're given the quest to go rescue the princess. Okay, it's like one of the first RPGs on a console, so it's very rudimentary. You go and you get the princess, and that's actually only the first half of the game. You have to beat the green dragon and get the princess, and you go to the swamp cave. Once you beat him, you carry up the princess, and your little sprite, this is 8-bit NES, your sprite changes, and the hero is carrying the princess. And you have to walk her back to the castle. And that really hit me as a little, whatever, like 7-year-old or something like that when I was first playing that. Because it was like, oh, that's like a sense of accomplishment, 1, a sense of duty, 2. And it's just...
And honorable, you know, there's something honorable about that too.
And that completely wrapped up that little sub-quest in a nice, neat way when I presented her in front of the king.
Yes.
And said,
Now, forget, you know, the fact that I wrote a thesis about the damsel in distress.
Yeah,
Problem, okay? But remember, this isn't about perfection, right? It's not about the perfection of form. It's not about what people should be. If it were, video games would look very different, and I don't think any of us would want to play them. What it is supposed to be is representative of the human condition. And what we just heard is a story about a child that makes a linkage to, I think, some things that people are very, you know, or I think people would smile at. The idea that you can dedicate yourself to someone so much that you could rescue them and bring them to safety.
Yeah, and
That's awesome.
it made me feel, one of the first times in a video game I wasn't just having fun, I actually felt something.
And then maybe you'd want to do something like that. A good positive thing, you'd like to do that in your life. You have had a question for a while. You sat down and everything, and I feel bad because...
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
No worries. Just thinking, we were talking earlier about the sense of agency that games provide, a sense of really being part of the story. Now, not that other media don't provide that,
Totally.
but games have to provide it in a different way. And it's occurred to me that raises interesting questions like the relationship between the gamer and the creators of the games. Like something I've observed is that because people feel such an investment in the games, feel they invested a lot of hours and work to beat the game, it seems that adds to a sense of something I've observed in interactions between fans and developers. At times fans express it as hurt or betrayal when they feel like this game isn't letting me express myself the way I want to, and maybe the games this company made used to let me play them the way I want to and express myself the way I want to, but they don't anymore. And some people experience that as they go so far as to describe it as like a developer is breaking up with them. That I think is really interesting. Exactly.
There is an awesome point in that I think is really worth mentioning.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. But what's So I think there's some really cool ideas. There's a lot going on there. I'll try to unpack a little bit of it. But I think one of the cool parts of this is that there is investment, right, in these things that we do collectively, not just individually. So you heard an individual story here, but then collectively all of us kind of come together and we go, oh, was that your reading? That was kind of my reading too, right? But we're also seeing that video games, like cinema, okay, like television, like novels, are representative of a smaller group, not all of society or not a culture, but a smaller group of people, or even a single individual's view onto a particular subject or a particular part of the world, right? A director has a vision for a film. A producer that sits down to try to make a video game has a vision for that game. They're not necessarily trying to tell your perspective. They're not necessarily trying to tell my perspective. But I think Mass Effect, you mentioned Elder Scrolls, I think there are ways that they can kind of open that up that do some really cool things. Is it important that you play, I'm talking about my own show now, this is terrible. I promised I wouldn't hype up my own show. But anyway, I talked about this last week. Is it important to embody a specific gender when you play a video game? I mean, that is, I think, a question that's still kind of, because that's exactly to your point, right? Is it important that I am myself? Is it important that I am something different than myself? And does that affect my agency? All right, I'll shut up.
I would argue that from a widespread sociological standpoint, because these are games, because this is media consumed by a mass audience, I do think it is important for people to see themselves or see people who look like them or resonate with their social status or race, gender within the games. And part of the reason I love RPGs is that they're agnostic towards the player character's attributes. Like you start off like a lot of them. I mean, Elder Scrolls is my favorite long-running series because I can be a female lizard man if I want to be. And then I can re-roll as the Nordiest dude bro on the planet.
So you have a lot of games nowadays that give you that option where like you'll be given, if you're playing an RPG and you are the role, you're given questions and things you can answer as you want. But going back a little bit, how do you feel about the silent protagonist in RPGs, where there's really no options on what you can choose really, and there's also no real interaction because it's like a Chrono Trigger. Your hero is just silent because you're supposed to
you read the text and hear your...
So as opposed to like Final Fantasy 6.
It creates some interesting things, but I think at the end of the day, the fact that the player character is really the only person in a video game with agency often overpowers the fact that they project that through action almost universally, even if they don't project that through choice.
I'm gonna take a little bit of an issue with what's one thing you said, which is the kind of full-on agnostic. And I love Elder Scrolls, by the way. One of my favorite series of video games of all time, always will be. I think to say that it takes an agnostic approach is probably giving it a little too much credit, because I think the apparatus does, to a certain degree, always, as we say in philosophy, always already is imbued with particular attributes of a particular person's vision. How many people played Elder Scrolls with a female character that didn't have huge breasts? Okay. How many of you played Tomb Raider with a character that didn't have huge breasts? So there you go, right? So, well, good point, right?
That was twice.
Totally, right? So it introduces, my point is there's always already someone's particular vision on what a character would look like. And that doesn't necessarily harm, all the way, your ability to link up with that character. How many of you, when you played the game and something happens that you don't like, you get killed or something, you start screaming at the character as if they were someone else? Like, you don't, what the f is wrong with you, right? I do that all the time, right? Now, when I tell somebody about what I just did, what do I say? I died. Right? So it's almost like I'm developing multiple personalities. I scream at this person when they do something wrong, and I embody them when they do something that I like. So maybe this is really not a question of representation. Maybe this is more a question of subjectivity. And that doesn't necessarily require an agnostic vision to complete, is my point.
I agree.
And progress can be made. Yes, sir, in the back.
Do you think there needs to be a balance between an engaging story and gameplay, or open worldness versus like a closed world?
Dude, you totally knocked out of the park the next question I was going to go after games is art, so thank you so much for that.
Well, let's segue.
Let's do it. Let's do a conversation on the importance of narrative and how that affects, I think, an open world environment changes the game in a lot of different ways.
I'm sorry, I was going to say.
Yeah, go. Why, you not want to talk?
No, sure. I think, not necessarily. I talk.
No, they're just trying to get back because it's colder back there.
Yes. So,
Just seats, no, just sitting our chairs down.
okay, one of my favorite games of recent times has essentially no game. I think I've talked about this in the probably the word build, and that's To the Moon, which is an indie game. It's essentially an interactive story. There's like some really tacked on kind of puzzliness every once in a while. That's about it. But the story is so envelops you, and I suggest it to anyone to go play it. Why haven't you played it?
Steam blocked me from that. I'm not saying I tried to buy it. Steam would not let me.
And so that literally is all narrative, almost no gameplay. On the other end, we've already talked about Minecraft and Kerbal's Space Program.
Oh, War Fortress.
Yeah, and there's a lot of examples of all gameplay, no story.
Well, that's debatable too. But anyway, go ahead.
Roughly,
Right.
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But you already
I
get
got
your own story.
Yeah, totally.
Right, but then that depends on the goal of the developer. I mean, you're talking, when you talk a different kind of genre there, you're talking about, you want to have a sandbox where you can do, what's that one that, you have Half-Life, Gary's Mod. So yeah, like Gary's Mod, but the whole point of that is go try stuff, build stuff, do stuff, or you want to say Minecraft. Or if there's something where there's a story, there's engagement.
Minecraft still has a story.
Minecraft definitely has a story. Or at least I would argue that. I think you can argue it either way. What I think is, I would call it an emergent story, which is something that is very understudied, number one. So all of you that want to go into academics and study video games, there's a topic for your thesis. But, or your doctoral dissertation if you want to go that far. But I think an emergent story is something that we have yet to really understand. It's not exactly what you said. It's not something that a developer set up to you and said, here's the story and you follow it. It's something that you create on, it's not even choose your own adventure. That is much more defined. This is something that, okay, I woke up the first day and I was next to a lake and I saw a mountain and I thought, I should probably protect myself before the evil things that happen when the sun goes down happen. So I stayed all night inside of a mountain. I mean, like, that is, there's no one that tells you you have to play Minecraft.
That's almost literally like if you want to take it as genre, the sandbox game. What do you do in a sandbox?
Right.
You have sand.
Right.
You know, maybe you make
Build
little castles.
sandcastles.
Right.
Yeah, maybe and then you tell a little story by yourself. That's
And then a large boy from down the street kicks it down.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, think about this. When you were a child, that's what you did. When you played in the sandbox, you made a game. You made a story.
Absolutely.
Right? You got your little man. You played, the little bang, and then you would drive the car around and you made that story.
I think there's a tremendous amount of power in emergent storytelling. Dwarf Fortress is easily one of my all-time favorite games. At Minecraft, like, I love those sandbox games and those simulation games. But at the same time, on the other end, you're not going to be able to recreate the same experience in Minecraft that you're going to get from The Last of Us or from Hotline Miami. Bioshock Infinite.
That's another good one.
So it's from a development standpoint. If you're approaching development as a storytelling tool, then the question is, what kind of a story do I want to tell, or what kind of a story do I like, and how much of that do I want the player to bring to the table?
So maybe the answer to your question is yes. We like all that. So I mean, narrative can be as important or as unimportant, I think, as you want it to be. If you're somebody like me who really likes well-developed stories, I mean, I love Bioshock Infinite. It's one of my favorite games I've ever played. I'm not done with it, so don't tell me how it ends. But I love being brought through someone else's vision, but being able to interact and make all those things happen step by step. But I love Minecraft, where something where I could just literally just sit there and build a clock tower all night in his server, and just wonder what the hell happens in the morning when he wakes up. Yeah,
With a hangover, what the hell did I just build last?
Yeah, what did I do? I was just like, I was in a meth-fueled rage, and I just built stuff.
I'm wondering what your opinion is, how you kind of feel about Metroid The Other End, where originally in the series there wasn't much story and then they decided to add story. And so many people were upset by this, and I'm one of those people. I didn't want anything to do with the game, but I'm thinking maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm missing out on a really great game because I'm too busy whining about, oh, they changed the character. I'm just wondering, what's your take on this?
You're not missing out.
Yeah.
Having said that, I mean that specific example, yeah. But
I would argue that just to make money.
I don't disagree with them having tried.
Yeah.
I have nothing wrong with them filling in Samus's backstory or giving her a voice. I just think they did a terrible job at it.
But I mean, can you think about the internet maelstrom that would come out if it was announced that the next Legend of Zelda game would have Link with voice acting?
Oh.
I mean, that's not even like, there's been story in Legend of Zelda games going back forever. But to add that one change of something that's so set in the public consciousness for decades. Link is a silent protagonist. Link, he goes,
With the long-running stuff, there's certainly a question for developers. Like, if you've got the long-running stuff, if you're making changes to it, you should ask the questions, what do we gain by this? And what do we lose? I think Final Fantasy games would be a great example. What did they gain by adding voice acting, and what did they lose by adding voice acting? Because they did gain stuff. They got a lot of, they were able to do a lot of more intricate, more cinematic stuff with the characters, but they also lost a flexibility and a breadth. Because, I mean, really I think the story kind of sucks in 10, but because it's this hybrid of, it's still got a lot of text, all unimportant characters still speak in text, but there's the voice acting. With that hybrid, they were still able to have a ton of side width, but then you look at 13 and it's 100% voice acted, and your width is barely arms. It's quite literally hallways.
Yeah. James had a whole extra credit episode talking about change and how it affects what you should change in the long run.
Because there will always be a trade-off.
Maybe throw this out there. Maybe what you're looking at is something that people have beef with for a long time that was expressed in different ways. So, how many of you saw Super Mario Brothers, the film, the movie, in the theater?
Yes.
What was that? That was an attempt by Hollywood to create a film off of something that ostensibly had very, very little. And John Leguizamo. But anyway, it became this kind of sad, pathetic excuse for what we all kind of had in our minds about Mario.
I prefer the animated show, to be honest.
Yeah, the animated show is classic. That's perfect. They nailed them. It's a little bit better, right? But my point is, when you flesh it out, you always take that risk. I think that's exactly what you're saying, Dan. What are the costs and benefits here that I can see, the risks and the rewards of fleshing out something that probably doesn't need a whole lot of fleshing out? And is it always bad? No, I don't think so. Is it always good? Definitely not. But there's probably, as Dan said already, there's a good way to do it, there's a bad way.
And the longer you go on with something that's established, the greater the risk.
The greater reward you need to justify making the change. And I think for the stories that Zelda tells, like Link emotes more than enough
You really don't need
for those stories. So unless they were going to like seriously amp up voltage on like the scope of the story they were telling, there's zero reason to give them a voice.
Alright, so we're running out of time here.
And is it art?
Quicker question.
I think Twilight Princess sort of had its workaround of giving Link a voice, is that they used the sidekick to give the character arc. And
that's why there was an open revolt in the streets, right? I mean, because I think if you did, the whole point is if you did, it would be, if you just gave that voice directly to Link.
No, but that was their way around, which I thought might.
Yeah, it is, it's creative, it makes sense.
I don't follow modern day games as much, but I was wondering what are they trying to do, trying to depict or portray constitutionalists as terrorists? Like in the Rainbow Six game, they're targeting white gun owners, and what is this path there? This is very, I've heard reports on this. Maybe there's more games out there that are doing this, but still it's wrong.
I think I will deflect the specificity of that question and answer, I think, what's more important broadly, which is, should video games tell stories about the world that we live in, number one. Number two, should they make a point about the world that we live in, number two. And number three, should we care about the accuracy of those things, number three. And all those things are important, right? Yeah. And all opinions are valid here, guys, right? It's okay. We've already said that we are okay with taking an agnostic position towards gender or toward particular character attributes in a character that I'm going to embody as an avatar. It's perfectly fine to say that I'm not going to play a game that has a particular worldview that I don't agree with. And it's also perfectly okay to say, I think this game embodies a great worldview that I do agree with, and I'm going to support it with my money. And so it becomes kind of my argument there becomes more of a marketing question. If you like what's out there and it's good, then buy it. And if you don't, guys, please don't, because it's the only way they're going to stop making this crap.
It's like a rise of political advocacy.
You only have 5 minutes left for wrapping up.
Games as propaganda.
I don't know if I'll answer my question.
You didn't ask me. Good defense. Very good. I think one of the first games I can think of games as, or at least games as supposed propaganda is, this is fun talking about this, but America's Army.
Yes.
Which is like a first-person shooter from about a decade ago, funded development by the U.S. Army to teach,
to gain further interest.
Very realistic, and also to provide spur interest in the U.S. Army and have realistic tactics, weapons, etc., etc. And there is a bit of a blowback on that. It's still good. I think it's still going though. I mean, it's.
Yeah, but it's so old. I think there was a chance
My contribution to that answer would be 100% is absolutely important that we, the audience, be critical of the media that we consume and the messages in that media. I will not inject my personal politics into where I think games are like the kinds of messages that they're projecting, but they are projecting messages. Often unintentionally, but they're still putting those out there. And a lot of times it's like, you can, like, they make one game, but there's also 7 others like it, and you play all of them. So, well, the individual content creators aren't necessarily guilty one by one, because they just made one game. The industry as a whole, and the course of the industry as a whole, which is dictated by what we buy, in turn influences the kinds of messages that are sold.
Be critical is the best message I think we can come off of this panel with. Be critical of things you look at, right, folks? Games are fun. We like video games, but it's cool to dig into them and find out why they work and what they do. That's why we're all here. I bet that's probably why a lot of you are here. So keep that critical eye. The other thing I'll say though is this. We also have to defend, I think, people and the creators' capabilities to make whatever kind of video game they want to. And we can accept and we can reject that, we can get up in arms about it, or we can be okay with it. But that is something that the creators and the consumers have to kind of keep in check. And we are out of time, so why don't we tell you guys where you can find us, and we can give a shameless plug, and then we'll get out of here.
I'm on a website called shayapocalypse.com. That's like the French word for house, shayapocalypse. Also foldablehuman.com, and you can find me on Twitter at foldablehuman.
We are from the clanofthegraywolf.com. I am the Commodore. You can find me on Twitter. It's the Commodore, all one word.
I am on clanofthegraywolf.com. Also, you can find me at retrowaretv.com. I'm on Twitter, Roo, ROO_COTGW.
Thanks, guys. Great conversation.